Thank you for tuning in to the Into the Classroom series produced by Mental Health California, sponsored by Blue Shield of California's Blue Sky Initiative.
Welcome to the Into the Classroom session, which is a student mental health awareness multimedia series produced by Mental Health California. I'm your host, Conrad Crump, affectionately known as Coach Crump, and today's topic will be talking about understanding and supporting youth with mood disorders. Now, today we'll explore the different types of mood disorders that affect young people, such as depression and bipolar disorder. And our clinical advisor will be here to help us understand the signs and symptoms to look out for, as well as the impact that these disorders can have on a young person's life. We'll also talk about strategies for supporting youth with mood disorders, including therapy, medication, and creating a supportive and holistic environment. With us today, I'd like to welcome Mark Clanton, who is a licensed clinical social worker at HearYou.org with a background supporting foster youth of all ages. Now, Mark has worked in community mental health settings in Northern California and has expertise supporting individuals with anxiety, those dealing with grief and loss, as well as members of the LGBTQ plus community. Welcome, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Glad to have you here. At this time, I'd also like to take the time to introduce our youth guests who will be joining us. Today with us, we have Sophia Toledo from William J. Pete Knight High School. Hey
Hello.
there, Sophia.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Good to see you. And we also have with us Michael Betlak from Sacramento State University. What's going on, Michael?
What's up, Coach Crump?
Oh, man, not a whole lot. Just, happy to be back for another session. And with us, we also have Lucy Lebec from El Cerrito High School. Welcome, Lucy.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Glad that everyone is here. So now, before we get into our discussion today, Mark, I'd like to ask you if you can just provide us a brief clinical overview, some insights into the complexities of mood disorders in youth.
Yeah, so mood disorders is kind of talking about a category within like the DSM that talks about a group of mental health challenges that deal primarily with our kind of emotional state and our emotional state over time. So as you said, it includes depression and bipolar, which are probably the most prevalent of mood disorders. And it includes a combination of symptoms between kind of more depressive symptoms, so that like lower mood and feelings of sadness and loss of interest in things that we used to enjoy. And then some challenges in mental health diagnoses like bipolar deal with more higher level and manic symptoms as well. But it's that broad category of that affects our emotional state over time.
Yeah, no, very good. Thanks for that overview. Definitely having that impact to our emotional state is a real thing. And I'd actually like to ask some of our student participants who are here with us today, just by a show of hands, have you yourself dealt with, or do you happen to know someone who's dealing with a mood disorder? Just by a show of hands. Yep. See, I know I wasn't alone, and you're not alone either. Right now, I'd actually like to go into our slide presentation where we can go a little further in on this topic. Understanding that, these disorders like depression and bipolar disorder can definitely impact the mental health of young folks today. They may even exhibit these behaviors without even realizing that they have a mental health condition. And sometimes they can be misdiagnosed, which can make the path to treatment even more difficult. We look at these different types of disorders. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, about 20% of young folks of all ethnicities and genders between the ages of 13 and 18 experience a severe mental disorder, including mood disorders. It's also important to note that the research suggests that minority groups face unique challenges and disparities in accessing mental health support. And let's go on to our next slide. Now, I'd like to go into some of the common types of mood disorders that exist. Some of the things that we're seeing in our young people. We see that we have major depressive disorder, which is characterized by persistent feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and a loss of interest in activities. And it can significantly impact a young person's ability to function and enjoy life. Going on to our next slide, we see that the next mood disorder is bipolar disorder, and this involves extreme mood swings, including periods of elevated moods or mania and depressive episodes. Young people with bipolar disorder may experience intense energy, impulsivity, and difficulty regulating their emotions. And the next mood disorder is persistent depressive disorder, or PDD, which is also known as dysthymia. Now, this involves ongoing low-grade depression that lasts for years, and it can manifest as a constant feeling of sadness, irritability, and a lack of interest in daily activities. And I want to ask our clinician about some of these disorders that we've heard. Could you kind of elaborate on what we might see or what typically is generally happening in young folks that might be dealing with these challenges?
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of the differences between these different disorders that you mentioned, the symptoms themselves look really similar from diagnosis to diagnosis. But what is most different between these diagnoses is kind of the intensity of these symptoms. And some of them also have different time frames for when they are doing them. So things like dysthymia is a little more, it's kind of like a low grade depression and kind of a cyclical thing. And then there's two different types of bipolar disorder that one of them has a lot stronger manic symptoms, while the other one does have some manic symptoms, but it's usually a little bit lower grade, and there's more of an experience with the depressive symptoms for those things. So a lot of the symptoms that pop up really frequently is what you mentioned, of kind of that loss of interest in things that we used to enjoy, feelings of sadness, lots of feelings of sometimes even guilt, lower energy, irritability is a big one that pops up frequently in a lot of these disorders as well. And even things like change in appetite and changes in our weight can be signs and symptoms of these disorders too.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks a lot for that analysis, Mark. Appreciate it. Let's go ahead and go on into our next slide. So, supporting students with mood disorders. We know that it is important to raise awareness about these disorders. We know it's important for schools to really support students as they're going through, different challenges and whatnot. They certainly, could and should prioritize mental health education, as well as the importance of seeking help. I'm just curious on a few pointers where students might be able to identify support. So I'd like to ask some of our students who are here today, some of the support that they may see, or where they may have seen places where they can go and get support. And I'll start off with you, Lucy. Are there places that you might be able to get support or look for support at your school?
Yeah, so I'm very lucky. I go to El Cerrito High, and at El Cerrito High, we have this thing called the James Morehouse Project, which is a place for students to go when they're anxious, when they need counseling and all that stuff. They have counselors, quiet rooms. They also have a whole health clinic where people can get birth control and those types of things. It's just like a really welcoming community, and it's a very comfortable place to go if anyone is feeling down. So I'm very lucky to have that.
Awesome. So from a high school perspective, there are places and resources, and I would assume so at college, but I don't want to speak for a college student. So Michael, can you give us a breakdown of what you see at your school?
Yeah, kind of like Lucy, Sac State, we have an entire kind of section for health specifically. It's called the Well. We have our gym there, we have doctors there, you can get prescriptions there, you can see counselors there. It's all in one specific section to just prioritize health. They have cooking classes there, for students who want to learn how to cook or be more just have better nutrition throughout their day-to-day lives. So, there's a lot of support in the Well, and it's pretty cool to see, all the different things that we have. It's a blessing.
Nice, nice. All right, let's go ahead and go on to our next slide. So we know it's important for schools to provide resources for students, such as El Cerrito High and Sac State, which is a wonderful thing. And we also know that there are many different ways that schools can be helpful, with helping folks, or particularly young folks. And wanted to ask about what peer support, strategies might help and how that might be a resource for students as well. I'm curious, let me ask you, Lucy, why do you think a peer support program might be important for young folks?
Well, as a teenager myself, I know how isolating it can feel to be a teenager, especially growing up with social media and seeing like peer pressure and wow, their life looks perfect. Why isn't my life perfect? And it's really beneficial to hear other youths talk and be like, oh, maybe I'm not alone. Maybe this is actually a common occurrence. And just like to be able to get support from someone who completely understands, is going through the same life changes, is very beneficial and helps people feel less alone, I would say.
Very good. Very good. And how about you, Sophia? I'm not trying to leave you out of the mix here. Let me ask you, what might be a benefit of a student having some peer support groups?
A benefit will be having whatever they have in their mind just out there, so they won't feel alone, and so they just because it really affects the mental state if you keep your feelings bottled up for a while, a good amount of time. Like you might snap at a person, and it gets like it's a whole mess. And so then it's better to have people who are there to listen to you, so that won't happen, and it'll just make life a little less of a struggle.
Wonderful feedback. Yeah, thank you both for that. Thank you. So let's go ahead and go to our next slide. So now, as we look at this, we know that schools can support students, again, by collaborating with mental health professionals and offering different types of interventions, including counseling, therapy, so on and so forth. And we know that these interventions can provide students with coping strategies, provide students with emotional support, as well as a safe space to express their feelings. Let's go ahead and go to our next slide. So when it comes to these interventions, having culturally appropriate therapies, such as race or ethnic specific community defined practices like healing circles, for example, can certainly benefit, diverse students. So making sure that there's a cultural competency and being, in a space where someone who has a similar experience, similar background as you is important. And I'd actually like to ask Michael, if you can kind of talk about that a little bit, maybe the power and the benefit of having culturally competent, therapies or just community.
Yeah, it's kind of like what Lucy and Sophia were saying, that when you have people who understand what you're going through, it makes it much easier to feel seen and to get those feelings out and to just, be aware of what's going on and realize that, you're not the only one. And so it's like a real humanizing effect to realize, like, these people feel what I'm feeling, and they're still, going through their day to days, so it makes it just apparent that you can get through it, and it's real helpful.
Thank you for that feedback. That's wonderful. All right, now, Mark, I want to pivot back to you because we've talked about ways that schools can help students. We've also heard from students in ways that they've found resources on their campuses and whatnot. I'm just curious. I'd like to actually ask you what might be some helpful tips for parents and caregivers who might be listening in our audience today.
Yeah, that's a great question. I loved hearing y'all talk about kind of the ways that y'all are able to access support, because I think with mood disorders, that's really one of the most important things, is getting that support. With all of those kind of like low mood and low energy and irritability, it can be really natural to kind of self-isolate and kind of withdraw from your support system. So I think for parents and for friends or anybody who knows somebody that's going through this, I think being able to be there for that person and to be able to provide some encouragement without judgment is really important. A lot of the times people experiencing mood disorders are really down on themselves, and as I mentioned earlier, there's sometimes some feelings of guilt that are common symptoms of mood disorders. So just having somebody there as a support that that you can talk to, and that makes you feel less alone, can be really, really powerful.
Wow, thanks a lot for that. And that actually segues into our next slide. Very important for our caregivers and our parents and family members who might be listening in our audience right now to be able to know that there are tips available for you as well. Some of them being able to, like Mark talked about, maintain an open and non-judgmental communicative space with your child. Also, learning about the mood disorders and their symptoms is important as well as consulting mental health professionals, being able to have that accurate diagnosis that, you might think it's one thing, but it could be something else. So having that analysis and that diagnosis is key, as well as offering emotional support and reassurance to your child. I mean, I can't stress more enough, like, how important it is to offer support and reassurance to our young folks today. So let's go ahead and go into our next slide. So now another common type of treatment is psychotherapy, which actually talks about, mental health professionals and how they explore and address the underlying causes of mood disorders. And I know that cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is a specific type of psychotherapy that focuses on changing the negative thought patterns and behaviors. These are some of the things that our clinicians and our licensed folks who have this type of training are able to identify and really utilize this type of therapy for our young folks. And as we see, another type of option for youth is medication. Antidepressants, mood stabilizers, these things can help to regulate mood and reduce symptoms. But it is definitely important to note that medication should always be used in conjunction with therapy and under the supervision of a healthcare professional. And I actually want to pivot to you again, Mark, and just ask if you can kind of elaborate on the aspect of medication and maybe even CBT, going back a little bit earlier, CBT therapy and medication, and how those types of treatments can be beneficial for our young folks.
Yeah, I'll start by kind of going back to CBT, and really the foundation of CBT is the idea that our thoughts, our behaviors, our our emotions and our physical bodies are all interconnected, and they all have an impact on each other. And so what CBT does is as you said, it looks at those negative thought patterns. It looks at those those behavioral patterns of maybe self-isolating and things like that. And CBT takes approaches to start to shift those patterns, whether that's kind of practicing changing our thought patterns from focusing on the negative to focusing back to positive things and doing some gratitude exercises, or finding ways that even if we do feel kind of down or we do feel this impulse to self-isolate, doing something that we know might be more beneficial in the long run, even if it's a little bit harder to do right now. And then I think the way that medication plays into that is that, the reality is that some of these disorders are there's a physical component, right? And there's a component of brain chemistry in there. And sometimes there's a little bit of balance that is needed to kind of rebalance some neurotransmitters and things like that contribute to this problem. So I think medication is definitely a component of this and can address some of the more physiological symptoms and physiological causes of these mood disorders. But as you said, it is really most effective when it is combined with some kind of psychotherapy and just a general support system as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Mark. And I'm really glad that you underscored the aspect of it being a part and not the medication piece, because I know oftentimes folks think, oh, I'll just pop a pill or I'll take my medication, it's prescribed, it's fine, and I'll be fine. But I think that's only a piece of the puzzle, right? I feel like, having those other elements to assist, your wellness and guide you into getting, regulated moods is something that, definitely plays a key part. And as we talk about other ways, to support our young folks, with regard to their mood disorders and so on and so forth, I want to think about some natural remedies, beyond medication. So when we talk about natural remedies, these things might include physical activity or eating healthy, getting exercise. But I'd actually like to ask some of our young folks, particularly, our young folks in high school, what, some of the natural treatment remedies they think might help regulate moods of a young person. And I'd like to start with you, Sophia. Might you be able to just kind of give us a couple of natural remedy tips or treatment ideas?
Yeah, so one of the things for me personally, what I like to do is I like to listen to the music. I like to, my favorite music, or just get a hobby. Like I like painting. Painting gets your mind off stuff. And swimming is, those are just some of the stuff that you could do to get your mind off stuff. And then what's even better is you could talk to the people you're comfortable with to really just, have your thoughts out there, so you won't, like I said before, hold it in all together, because like that's just really not healthy. Because I'm telling you, you'll feel so much better when you get your mind out there. Because me personally, if I have it all in, then I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm all over the place, because I'm like, oh wow, who do I tell this to? Who do I, what do I do? And then yeah, so me personally, I like to talk a good amount to the people I'm comfortable with.
That's actually really good. So as I'm thinking about this, what you just told me were a couple of things. Creating, the aspect of painting, having your ideas or thoughts, whatever, and getting it out and just expressing it, right? I've also heard you say something about talking and being able to talk to people, talk to your friends, your family, whoever. That's a huge piece, and that's totally a great remedy, as well as swimming, that exercise, that's something that helps your mood and everything get regulated. So thank you so much for that. You gave some great tips. How about you, Lucy? Anything else you want to add?
Well, I think that, yeah, so the way I go about doing, like, helping myself when I'm in a bad mental state is I love working out. And Like I like going to the HIIT gym, which like just like running and strength training is really nice. And yeah, like creating, I don't paint, but I write music, so it's in the same realm. And also to add to that, definitely eating well. People don't really think about what they're like, how much what they're putting into their body is affecting their mood. And I can tell when I'm eating clean and when I'm eating better, I feel so much lighter and I feel less tired and I just feel better about myself. And also getting enough sleep is very important. Just trying to get those 8-9 hours a night. It's practically impossible as a student, but just like trying is important. That's how I stay afloat, I would say.
No, that's really great advice. Thank you so much, Lucy and Sophia. Both of you really kind of took the words out of my mouth. And going on to our next slide, as mentioned from Lucy, obviously sleep, right? I mean, adequate sleep is crucial for maintaining, emotional well-being, as well as, mentioned eating healthy, getting a balanced diet, eating healthy, all of those things have been linked to improving mental health. Looking at that sleep, right? Going back to the sleep part, having the ability to have a sleep cycle is something that can certainly benefit you. And also another aspect is practicing mindfulness and meditation. Those types of things can help manage stress, reduce anxiety, and just improve overall well-being. And also just want to add that, they do have different types of guided meditation apps that folks can download on their phones to try to get in, 5 minutes, 10 minutes here and there, which can truly prove to be beneficial. So let's go ahead and go on to our next slide. So other therapies include creative activities like painting, we've heard this before, playing a musical instrument or writing music that Lucy shared with us. All of these are definitely beneficial outlets for expressing emotions and promoting your self-expression. And let's go on to our next slide. It's also important to note that spending time outside in nature and engaging in outdoor activities can truly have a positive benefit and a positive impact on your mood and on your mental health. Try to spend some time in the sun, go for a walk, just stand outside. There truly is, a magical way in which the sun can help produce positive energy inside of us. So I would definitely recommend getting outside. If you can get out and, like I said, just go for a walk, go to a park. Just being outside can certainly lift your mood and just help you in a positive way. And as we also heard earlier, having that supportive social connection with your friends, with your peers, families, these are ways in which you can certainly support your wellness journey as a young person. I'd like to pivot back to Mark. Are there any other tips or anything that we may have want to add to this conversation?
I think, yeah, I loved what y'all shared. I love all of the just kind of like natural coping skills of painting and swimming and exercising. Those are fantastic. I think the one thing that I would add is that, anything is better than nothing, right? So if we can't go out and go for a run, going for a 5-minute walk around the block is still going to help, right? If we can't eat like, a perfectly balanced meal every meal, incorporating in a piece of fruit into our diet throughout the day is going to help, right? So I think, especially when we're kind of in those low places, we can kind of feel overwhelmed by the prospect of, trying to do everything right. But I think if we can take small steps and work towards the stuff that we're wanting to do, that would be my one piece of advice, is just like doing something, no matter how small, is going to be better than doing nothing at all.
Wow. Very good. Very good feedback. And, just kind of wanted to briefly ask, our folks, is there any other thing that you might find beneficial? And I want to ask you, Michael, are there any other strategies or tips, or having used some of these tips, have you found them to be helpful for you?
Yeah, another tip that I kind of try to use as often as possible is paying attention to my thoughts and what I'm thinking, throughout the day to day. Because, your thoughts can have a huge impact on how you're feeling. It can cause you anger, stress, anxiety, um, a bunch of the negative feelings that you don't need to be feeling. And so, a good practice that I find myself doing is I try to catch those thoughts and really analyze it and think like, okay, why am I thinking this? It's not true. Doesn't have to be true, whatever. And so I just try to pay attention to those thoughts and try to limit them. And try to, think about the good in life, think about my family, my future, um, the blessings that I have now. And so I just try to, you know, it's like a battle with your mind on a day-to-day basis. And you just got to put in that effort to try to challenge those thoughts.
Wow, very powerful, man. Very powerful. I appreciate that. Great way to kind of wrap us up, just being grateful and mindful of the present, I appreciate you for sharing that with us. And I actually appreciate each and every one of our youth participants that are here today. Really want to take the time to say thank you, Sophia. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Michael, just for spending time sharing your insights, your wisdom, your contributions. Also want to give a huge thank you to Mark, our licensed clinician, just for providing that insight and that knowledge for us to kind of wrap our minds around and help some of those of us that are on this call right now, as well as those of us who are in the audience that might be listening, and just to be able to learn something. So I thank all of you just for having a wonderful session. I'd also like to thank you, our audience, for joining us in our Into the Classroom session, which is a production of Mental Health California. Please be sure to check us out at mentalhealthca.org. I also want to let you know that if you would like to access mental health and wellness topics for boys and men of color, you can also check out our signature initiative at brotherbewell.com, and be sure to subscribe to our blog. Also want to give a huge shout out and thank you to our sponsor, Blue Shield of California's Blue Sky Initiative, which promotes access to mental health support. And you can learn all about their program at bluesky.blueshieldca.com. With that, I'm your host, Conrad Crump. Until next time, take good care of yourselves.